I never thought a single phone call would expose 15 years of lies. My name is Rachel, and 3 months ago, I inherited $3.2 million from my grandmother. What happened next tore my family apart and taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. If you want to see how money reveals people's true colors, stay with me because this story gets wild. Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever dealt with toxic family drama, and subscribe because I'm about to share exactly how I turned my biggest betrayal into my greatest victory. Growing up, I always knew my grandmother Eleanor was different from the rest of my family. While everyone else chased status symbols and complained about money, she lived in the same modest 2-bedroom house for 40 years, drove a 15-year-old Toyota, and wore clothes until they literally fell apart. My cousins used to joke that she was cheap, but I saw something else entirely. She was content. Every summer, from age 7 to 17, I spent 2 weeks with Grandma Eleanor. Those weren't glamorous vacations. We gardened, baked bread from scratch, and spent evenings reading library books on her tiny front porch. She never bought me expensive gifts or took me to fancy restaurants. Instead, she taught me how to find joy in simple things, how to grow tomatoes that actually tea, how to mast like something in clothes instead of throwing them away, how to listen to people when they spoke instead of just waiting for my turn to talk. The rest of my family thought these visits were punishment. My mother would drop me off with an apologetic smile, telling Grandma Eleanor she was sorry I had to stay in such cramped quarters. My father would slip me $20 before I left, whispering that I should call if I needed anything real. My older brother Marcus and younger sister Jessica refused to visit at all after age 12, claiming it was boring and embarrassing. What they didn't know was that Grandma Eleanor had been quietly building a fortune. She worked as a bookkeeper for 3 different small businesses for over 30 years, lived below her means, and invested every spare dollar in index funds and blue-chip stocks. By the time she retired, her portfolio was worth over $4 million. She never mentioned money during our visits, never complained about being treated like the poor relative, never defended herself when my mother made comments about her lifestyle choices. The funeral was exactly what you'd expect. My mother organized everything, choosing the most expensive casket and flowers money could buy. She kept saying things like, "Mother would have wanted the best," and "we need to honor her memory properly," while writing checks that made my stomach turn. The service lasted 3 hours, with eulogies from family members who hadn't visited her in years. Marcus spoke about what a strong woman she was, though he'd seen her maybe 6 times in the past decade. Jessica cried dramatically about missing her guidance, despite ignoring her phone calls for months at a time. My Uncle David and Aunt Patricia shared touching memories from their childhoods, conveniently forgetting how they'd stopped inviting her to family gatherings because her old car embarrassed them. I sat in the back row, listening to these performances and feeling sick. These people were rewriting history, turning themselves into devoted family members who had cherished every moment with Grandma Eleanor. The truth was, I was the only one who had spent real time with her in recent years. I was the one who drove her to doctor appointments when her vision started failing. I was the one who called her every Sunday evening just to chat about her garden and whatever book she was reading. 2 weeks after the funeral, the lawyer called. James Morrison had been Grandma Eleanor's attorney for 20 years, handling her will and estate planning. His office was downtown in one of those old brick buildings that screamed old money and serious business. The waiting room had dark wood paneling and leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's cars. When he called me back to his private office, I expected to receive maybe a few $1,000s and some family jewelry. Grandma Eleanor had always been generous with small gifts, slipping me $50 here and there, or buying me books she thought I'd enjoy. I figured the bulk of whatever modest estate she'd left would go to my mother, her eldest child, with smaller amounts distributed among the grandchildren. Morrison was a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He gestured for me to sit in one of the chairs facing his massive mahogany desk, then opened a thick folder with my grandmother's name printed on the tab. "Rachel," he began, his voice gentle but professional. "Your grandmother spoke about you often. She was very proud of the young woman you've become." He paused, studying my face. "What I'm about to tell you may come as quite a shock." He slid a document across the desk toward me. The top of the page read, "Last Will and Testament of Eleanor Grace Patterson." I scanned the legal language, not really understanding most of it, until my eyes caught on a section that made my heart stop. "To my beloved granddaughter, Rachel Marie Patterson, I leave the entirety of my estate, including all financial assets, real property, and personal belongings, valued at approximately $3.2 million. I read the line 3 times before looking up at Morrison. "This can't be right," I whispered. "What about my mother, my uncle and aunt, the other grandchildren?" Morrison nodded slowly. "Your grandmother was very specific about her intentions. She left small gifts to other family members, a few $1,000s each, but the vast majority of her estate goes to you." He pulled out another document. "She also left this letter to be given to you personally." My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Grandma Eleanor's careful handwriting. "My dearest Rachel," it began, "if you're reading this, I've moved on to whatever comes next, and you're probably sitting in James Morrison's office, wondering what on earth I was thinking." I had to pause, wiping tears from my eyes as I continued reading. "The truth is, I've been watching our family for decades, and I've seen how money changes people, how the promise of inheritance makes them act interested when they're really just positioning themselves for advantage. I've watched your mother stress about my will for years, making token visits and pretending to care about my opinions on everything from politics to what I should plant in my garden." The letter went on to detail years of observations I'd never realized she was making. How Marcus only called when he needed money. How Jessica's interest in family history suddenly increased when she learned about potential inheritance. How my Uncle David had been dropping hints about her house being too much for an elderly woman to maintain, suggesting she might want to move somewhere smaller and leave the property to family who could properly care for it. "But you," the letter continued, "you came to see me because you genuinely enjoyed my company. You asked about my life, my stories, my thoughts on books and gardening and the changing world around us. You never once asked about money or inheritance or what I planned to do with my assets. You loved me for who I was, not what I might leave behind." The final paragraph hit me like a physical blow. "I'm giving you this responsibility because I trust you to use it wisely. Not to show off or gain status, but to build something meaningful. I hope you'll remember what I taught you about finding joy in simple things and not letting wealth corrupt your values. The money is a tool, not a definition of your worth. Use it well, and remember that the most important things in life still can't be bought." I sat in Morrison's office for what felt like hours, reading and rereading Grandma Eleanor's letter. The weight of $3.2 million felt surreal, but the weight of her words felt even heavier. She had seen through everyone's masks, understanding family dynamics I had been too naive to recognize. Morrison cleared his throat gently. "Rachel, I should mention that your grandmother anticipated there might be some family reaction to this decision. She asked me to handle any initial communications or legal challenges that might arise." "Legal challenges?" The phrase made my stomach drop. "It's not uncommon for families to contest wills when inheritance distribution isn't what they expected," he explained. "Your grandmother wanted you to be prepared for that possibility." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Call me immediately. We need to discuss Mother's arrangements." I hadn't told anyone about the meeting with Morrison. As far as the family knew, we were all still waiting to hear about the will. My mother's urgency suggested she already suspected something wasn't going according to her expectations. The drive home gave me time to think. Grandma Eleanor had entrusted me with more money than I could have imagined, but she had also given me something more valuable. She had shown me the truth about my family. The question now was what I intended to do with both revelations. My apartment felt different when I walked in. The same small one-bedroom place I'd been renting for 3 years, with its hand-me-down furniture and walls covered in library book sale finds. But now, I was a millionaire sitting on a second-hand couch, trying to process a reality that felt completely disconnected from everything I understood about my life. I made a cup of tea, sat at my tiny kitchen table, and made a list. Not of things I wanted to buy or places I wanted to travel, but of what Grandma Eleanor had actually taught me during those summer visits. Patience, simplicity, the difference between want and need, how to see people's true character through their actions rather than their words. That's when the idea started forming. An idea so bold it scared me, but felt absolutely right at the same time. My phone rang. Mom. Rachel, sweetheart, I just spoke with Mr. Morrison's office. He said you had a meeting today about Mother's estate. I hope you didn't sign anything without family consultation. These legal matters can be very complicated. Her voice had that artificially sweet tone she used when she wanted something. I could practically hear her calculations spinning in the background. It was just an initial meeting, Mom. Nothing complicated. Well, I think we should all sit down together as a family and discuss how to handle Mother's affairs properly. She may have had some outdated ideas about money management that need modern perspective. There it was. The assumption that Grandma Eleanor couldn't possibly have made sound financial decisions on her own. The presumption that the family should collectively override her wishes if they didn't align with everyone's expectations. What kind of outdated ideas? I asked, genuinely curious about how she would justify whatever came next. Oh, you know how elderly people can be. Sentimental about money, not thinking strategically about tax implications or family needs. I'm sure she meant well, but we need to make sure her legacy is handled responsibly. The irony was staggering. My mother, who had never shown interest in Grandma Eleanor's opinions while she was alive, was now positioning herself as the guardian of her legacy. I think Grandma Eleanor was pretty clear about her intentions, I said carefully. A pause. Then her voice changed, becoming sharper. Rachel, what exactly did Mr. Morrison tell you? This was it. The moment where I could either enable the family dynamic that had hurt Grandma Eleanor for years, or I could honor her real wishes. Not just the money part, but the lesson part. He told me that Grandma Eleanor left me everything. Silence. Complete silence for almost 30 seconds. Everything? Her voice was barely a whisper. The house, the investments, everything except small gifts to other family members. What followed was an explosion of emotion I had never heard from my mother before. Anger, confusion, accusations, and demands all jumbled together in a stream of consciousness that revealed exactly what Grandma Eleanor had been observing all these years. That's impossible. I'm her daughter. I took care of her arrangements. I planned her funeral. I've been managing her affairs for months. She couldn't have been thinking clearly. We need to contest this immediately. This isn't fair to the family. You don't understand the responsibility of that kind of money. Each sentence proved Grandma Eleanor's point more clearly than any letter could have. My mother's first concern wasn't my well-being or honoring Grandma Eleanor's wishes. It was about what she felt entitled to receive. Mom, maybe we should talk about this in person. Yes. Family meeting. Tonight. Everyone needs to understand what's happening here. She hung up without saying goodbye, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a decision that would define everything that came next. Within 2 hours, my phone had exploded with calls and texts from Marcus, Jessica, Uncle David, and Aunt Patricia. Word had spread through the family network faster than wildfire, and everyone had opinions about what should happen next. Marcus left a voicemail that started supportive but quickly turned calculating. Hey sis, heard about the inheritance situation. That's crazy about Grandma having that much money, right? Listen, I've been thinking about starting that business I mentioned, and with your new situation, maybe we could discuss some family investment opportunities. Jessica's approach was more direct. Rachel, we need to talk. This inheritance thing is causing drama, and it's not fair to anyone. Grandma Eleanor obviously wasn't thinking straight at the end. We should split everything equally, like a normal family would. The texts from my aunt and uncle followed similar patterns. Shock at the amount of money, followed quickly by suggestions about how it should be redistributed more fairly among the family. That evening, I sat in my apartment and realized that Grandma Eleanor had given me more than money. She had given me a test. Not just of what I would do with wealth, but of what I would do with the truth about my family. The family meeting was scheduled for the next evening. Everyone would gather at my mother's house to discuss the situation and figure out how to move forward as a family unit. The expectation was clear. I would be reasonable, recognize that Grandma Eleanor's decision was unfair to everyone else, and agree to share the inheritance appropriately. But I had a different plan entirely. One that would honor Grandma Eleanor's real lesson while teaching my family something they desperately needed to learn. I spent that entire night planning what I would say at the family meeting, not just about the inheritance, but about everything I had observed over the years. Grandma Eleanor had taught me to see people clearly, and now I finally understood what she meant. The next evening, I arrived at my mother's house to find everyone already assembled in the living room. The same living room where we had gathered for holidays, birthday parties, and family celebrations for decades. But tonight felt different. There was tension in the air, whispered conversations that stopped when I walked in, and glances exchanged between family members that made me feel like an outsider in my own family. My mother had prepared coffee and cookies, setting them out on her best china as if this were a social gathering rather than what everyone knew it really was. An intervention designed to convince me to give up what Grandma Eleanor had left me. "Rachel, sweetheart, sit here next to me," Mom said, patting the couch cushion beside her. Her voice was honey sweet again, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes. Marcus was sitting across from me, wearing the expensive suit he only brought out for important occasions. Jessica had positioned herself near the window, arms crossed, an expression already defensive. Uncle David and Aunt Patricia flanked the room like bookends, their faces serious and concerned. "Now," my mother began, "I know yesterday was shocking for all of us. Learning that Mother had accumulated so much money and that she made such an unusual decision about her will. We're all still processing." She paused, looking around the room for nods of agreement, which she received from everyone except me. "The thing is, family decisions this big affect everyone. And we need to think about what Mother would have really wanted if she had understood the full implications of her choice." "What do you mean by full implications?" I asked. Uncle David leaned forward. "Well, Rachel, managing that kind of wealth is complicated. There are tax consequences, investment decisions, legal responsibilities. Your grandmother may not have realized the burden she was placing on you. Plus," Jessica added, "it's not really fair to the rest of us. We all loved Grandma Eleanor. We all have memories and connections with her. Why should one person get everything while the rest of the family gets a few $1,000s?" Marcus nodded. "I've been thinking about this from a practical standpoint. If we pool the inheritance and create a family trust, we could make decisions together. Invest it properly, maybe buy some real estate, create something that benefits everyone." I listened to each of them speak, hearing echoes of every conversation Grandma Eleanor had described in her letter. The assumption that she couldn't make sound decisions. The belief that her money should serve their needs rather than her wishes. The complete inability to consider that maybe, just maybe, she had reasons for her choice. Has anyone considered that Grandma Eleanor might have known exactly what she was doing? I asked quietly. The room fell silent. "Rachel," my mother said carefully. Mother was 87 years old. Elderly people sometimes make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. She always had a soft spot for you because you visited so often, but that doesn't mean she thought through the consequences. "What consequences are those exactly?" Aunt Patricia spoke up. "Well, for one thing, it's going to create resentment in the family. People are going to feel hurt and excluded. Is that really what she would have wanted? And frankly, Marcus added, you're 28 years old. You've never managed serious money before. You could lose it all through bad decisions or people taking advantage of you. So your concern is protecting me from my own inexperience? I asked. Exactly, my mother said, relief flooding her voice. We're thinking about your best interests, sweetheart, and the family's unity. I looked around the room at these people who claimed to love me, who insisted they had my best interests at heart, and I saw exactly what Grandma Eleanor had seen. They weren't concerned about my well-being. They weren't worried about family unity. They were angry that someone else had control over money they felt entitled to. I have a proposal, I said, standing up from the couch. Everyone leaned forward eagerly, expecting me to announce some reasonable compromise that would give them access to the inheritance. I'm giving it all away. The silence that followed was deafening. What do you mean, giving it away? Jessica's voice cracked slightly. I mean, I'm donating the entire $3.2 million to charity. Every penny except what I need to pay the taxes. My mother's face went completely white. Rachel, that's insane. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Grandma Eleanor left me that money to teach me something about family, about values, about what really matters in life. And she taught me well. Marcus stood up abruptly. You can't just throw away millions of dollars to make some kind of point. That's our family's money. No, Marcus, it's my money. Grandma Eleanor left it to me specifically because she knew this would happen. She knew that the moment anyone found out about it, suddenly everyone would become very interested in family relationships that they'd ignored for years. Uncle David's face was turning red. This is ridiculous, Rachel. Your grandmother worked her entire life to build that wealth. She would be horrified to see you waste it on strangers. Would she? Because according to her letter, she was pretty horrified watching family members pretend to care about her while positioning themselves for inheritance benefits. I pulled out Grandma Eleanor's letter and began reading sections aloud. The parts about Marcus only calling when he needed money. About Jessica's sudden interest in family history when inheritance became a possibility. About my mother's token visits and transparent attempts to influence financial decisions. With each revelation, the family's expressions shifted from anger to shock to shame and back to anger. She was spying on us, Aunt Patricia said indignantly, writing down private conversations and judging us. She was observing, I corrected, watching people's actions instead of believing their words, something she taught me to do during all those summer visits you thought were so pointless. My mother tried a different approach. Rachel, even if you're angry with us right now, think about the good this money could do for the family. Marcus could start his business. Jessica could buy a house. We could help your cousins with college expenses. And what about the good it could do for people who actually need it? People who don't have family members to fall back on? People who are struggling to survive rather than arguing about how to divide up millions they never earned? The room erupted in protests. Everyone talking at once, voices rising, accusations flying. They called me ungrateful, vindictive, emotionally unstable. They said I was making a terrible mistake that I would regret forever. They threatened to contest the will, to have me declared mentally incompetent, to do whatever it took to prevent me from throwing away their inheritance. Their inheritance? Not mine. Theirs. And that's when I knew Grandma Eleanor had been absolutely right about everything. I've already contacted 3 different charities, I said, speaking loudly enough to cut through the chaos. The local homeless shelter, a scholarship fund for underprivileged students, and an organization that provides support for elderly people who don't have family. The irony of that last one was not lost on anyone in the room. The money will be distributed equally among the 3 organizations, with the transfers beginning next week. Marcus slammed his fist on the coffee table. This is insane, Rachel. You're destroying our family over some twisted interpretation of what Grandma Eleanor wanted. I'm not destroying anything, Marcus. I'm revealing what was already there. Jessica started crying, But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration and rage. I can't believe you're doing this to us. After everything we've done for you growing up, what exactly did you do for me growing up, Jessica? Because I remember you refusing to visit Grandma Eleanor because her house was embarrassing. I remember you rolling your eyes when she tried to teach us things. I remember you complaining about having to spend time with the weird old lady. That's not fair, my mother interjected. We all loved Mother in our own ways. Did you? Because love isn't something you feel, Mom. It's something you do. And what you did was treat Grandma Eleanor like she was an obligation until you found out she had money. The accusations continued for another hour. They cycled through every possible argument, from the emotional manipulation to legal threats to appeals to family loyalty. But I had made my decision, and nothing they said was going to change it. Finally, Uncle David played what he clearly thought was his trump card. Fine, Rachel. If you're determined to be vindictive and destroy this family, go ahead. But don't come crawling back to us when you realize what you've thrown away. Don't expect any help from any of us when you're struggling financially and wishing you had made different choices. I looked at him calmly. Uncle David, I've been financially independent since I was 22. I've never asked any of you for money, for job references, for housing, for anything. The only person in this room who has consistently asked for financial help is Marcus, who's borrowed money from every family member, including Grandma Eleanor, and never paid any of it back. Marcus's face flushed red, but he didn't deny it. So, your threat to withdraw support I've never received isn't particularly compelling. I gathered my purse and jacket, preparing to leave. Where are you going? My mother asked desperately. We're not finished discussing this. Yes, we are. I've told you what I'm doing with the inheritance. The money will be donated as I described. If you want to contest the will, that's your choice. But you should know that Grandma Eleanor anticipated that possibility and structured everything to make challenges extremely difficult. I paused at the door and turned back to face the room full of angry, disappointed relatives. You know what the saddest part of this is? Grandma Eleanor would have happily shared her wealth with any of you if you had shown genuine care for her as a person. If you had visited because you enjoyed her company rather than because you felt obligated. If you had called to ask about her life rather than to ask for favors. If you had treated her like family instead of like a resource to be managed. The silence that followed was heavy with recognition and shame. But you didn't do any of those things. And now you're angry at me for making a choice that honors what she actually valued, rather than what you think she should have valued. I opened the door to leave, then turned back one final time. The transfers will begin Monday morning. If any of you would like to volunteer with the organizations receiving the donations, I'm sure they could use the help. And with that, I walked out into the night air, leaving behind a family that had revealed their true colors, and a decision that felt more right with every step I took away from that house. The next few days were a whirlwind of phone calls, legal meetings, and arrangements. Morrison helped me navigate the process of liquidating assets and preparing the charitable donations. The local media somehow caught wind of the story, though I never spoke to reporters directly. Anonymous heiress donates millions to local charities. Read the headline in the city newspaper? The article didn't mention my name, but it detailed the donations and quoted representatives from each organization about how the money would be used. The homeless shelter would expand their capacity and add job training programs. The scholarship fund would be able to help 50 additional students attend college each year. The elderly support organization would hire more staff and expand their services to reach isolated seniors throughout the county. Reading about the actual impact of those donations made every angry phone call and family confrontation worth it. Because my family wasn't giving up easily, the harassment began immediately. My mother called every morning for a week, alternating between tearful pleas and angry ultimatums. She started leaving voicemails at 3 a.m, her voice slurred with whine and desperation, Marcus showed up at my apartment building twice, demanding that I buzz him up so we could talk sense. When I refused, he stood in the lobby, shouting until security escorted him out. Jessica took a different approach. She began posting cryptic messages on social media about family betrayal and greed, never mentioning me directly, but making sure everyone in our social circle understood who she was talking about. Her posts painted her as the victim of my selfishness, a loving granddaughter devastated by my cruel decision to steal her inheritance. The most disturbing development came from Uncle David and Aunt Patricia. They hired a lawyer to investigate whether Grandma Eleanor had been mentally competent when she updated her will. They requested medical records, interviewed her former neighbors, and even tracked down grocery store clerks who had known her, desperately searching for any evidence that she had been confused or manipulated. Their lawyer called Morrison with threats about undue influence and elder abuse. The suggestion was that I had somehow coerced an elderly woman into changing her will, taking advantage of her loneliness to steal millions from her rightful heirs. The accusations were so outrageous that Morrison recommended I consider filing harassment charges. "They're grasping at straws," he assured me during one of our meetings. "Your grandmother was examined by multiple doctors in the months before her death. She was completely lucid and made these decisions independently. But I want you to be prepared for this to get uglier before it gets better." He was right about the ugliness. The family began spreading rumors throughout our extended network, painting me as manipulative and greedy. Cousins I barely knew started calling to express their disappointment in my choices. Family friends who had known me since childhood left concerned voicemails about my mental state. The most painful part wasn't their anger about the money. It was their complete inability to understand why I had made this choice. Not one family member asked about Grandma Eleanor's letter or tried to see the situation from her perspective. They were so focused on what they felt entitled to receive that they couldn't comprehend the lesson she had been trying to teach. 3 months later, I received a letter from the scholarship recipient program. A young woman named Maria wrote about how the donation had changed her life, allowing her to pursue her dream of becoming a teacher despite having no family support. She thanked the anonymous donor for believing in people like her when their own families had given up. That letter sits framed on my desk now, next to the last photo I took with Grandma Eleanor. Every time I look at it, I remember what she taught me about the difference between wealth and worth, between family and blood relations, between love and obligation. My biological family still doesn't speak to me, but I've found something better. A chosen family of people who value character over cash, who show up because they want to, not because they expect something in return. The money revealed everyone's true nature, including my own, and I finally understand what Grandma Eleanor meant when she said the most important things in life can't be bought.